Before Mamma Mia, there was war. There was sadness.
I've abandoned my child!
There was nothing. After Mamma Mia, there was peace. There was joy. There was love.
I licked her tit or whatever.
Mamma Mia may be the most powerful film of all time. There is no other film that is more effective than an SSRI to shoot serotonin straight to the brain. Like October is the season of the witch, the summer months are the season of Mamma Mia. We may not be prancing around on a Greek island with Meryl Streep and Colin Firth, but with a crisp glass of Chardonnay and the Mamma Mia DVD, you couldn't tell the difference. So, in the spirit of Mamma Mia, I decided to jazz things up a little with a little alcohol, a little makeup, a little costume. Do I look like a child that got into their mother's makeup palette, or is it 2019 Met Gala? Today, we're talking about Mamma Mia, a film that has brought joy to millions and peace to nations. Despite the pure joy and bliss it brings to millions, Mamma Mia is a very divisive film. You either love it or you hate it. And something that I've come across in my research and also just in life is that this division typically occurs along the lines of gender. Mamma Mia is branded as a film for women by women, and today I want to look at what makes it distinctly feminine and why it speaks to the girls and the gays everywhere. Mamma Mia helped solidify the idea of the female blockbuster, and today I'll be breaking down what that means. I read an entire book of critical essays on Mamma Mia, so I'm ready to dissect what makes this film a groundbreaking masterpiece. I'm not going to talk about the sequel because this video is already going to be really long. I initially sat down to script like a 7-8 minute short little video, and then at some point I blacked out and the script was 10 pages long. Straight off the bat, I'm going to say sorry about the sun. Me and her are not cooperating today, and that's okay. You know, she does her thing, I do mine, but the lighting might be a little all over the place. I'm breaking this video down into two parts. The first part, I'm talking about the blockbuster, what the blockbuster is, and how historically it's been quite masculine and targeted towards men, and how Mamma Mia swooped in and changed that. And then in the second part, I'm going to be analyzing Mamma Mia, looking at the songs, the themes, the style, just a typical little film analysis. Something I should have made clear is that with all the discussion of masculine, feminine, men and women, I'm not trying to disregard the people that don't fit those stereotypes, and I'm also not trying to argue that those stereotypes are like absolute and true. For example, when I say that blockbusters are targeted towards men, I'm not saying that all men on earth enjoy them or that women don't. I'm speaking in very broad terms about the like masculine feminine dichotomy, and a lot of it has to do with public perception and not my own beliefs. Maybe that's obvious, I'm not sure, but I just wanted to make that really clear. This is me from the future. I forgot to mention that I actually started a public Instagram. If you'd like to follow me, I had no other platform except Letterboxd and YouTube to communicate with you all with. And recently I really wanted more ways to like connect with everyone. So I made an Instagram. It's Films Fatales because Film Fatales was taken. But if you want to follow me on there, if you want to see what I'm up to, if you want to have a little chat, just head on over. So, without further ado, grab yourself a little glass of Prosecco and pop some ABBA in your Spotify queue because today we're talking about Mamma Mia. Mamma Mia the film is of course based off of Mamma Mia the stage musical. It is a jukebox musical, meaning that all the songs are already well-known pop songs rather than original compositions. The stage musical was written by Katherine Johnson, produced by Judy Kramer, and directed by Phillida Lloyd. It opened in the West End in London in 1999 and on Broadway in 2001. It achieved huge success on both Broadway and the West End and ended up being one of the longest running musicals. Naturally, it was translated onto the big screen, and Kramer, Johnson, and Lloyd also worked on the 2008 film. If you're unfamiliar with the plot or need a little refresher, single mother Donna and her daughter Sophie live on a Greek island where Donna runs a hotel. Sophie is due to marry her fiancé Sky in a couple days, so everyone is preoccupied with preparing. However, after finding her mother's diary from 20 years ago, Sophie discovers that she has 3 possible dads: the quintessential British gentleman Harry Bright, successful businessman Sam Carmichael, and free spirit Bill Anderson. Without telling anyone, Sophie invites all 3 men to her wedding with the belief that something will fall into place once she meets her dad. Their presence on the island shocks and embarrasses Donna, who was heartbroken by Sam and struggles to face him. Donna's best friends and former bandmates, Rosie and Tanya, support and comfort her, but there's tension between Sophie and Donna because Sophie resents her mother for keeping her father hidden from her. Once Sky finds out that Sophie invited them, he's frustrated that she doesn't realize that she already has a complete family, even without a father. Everybody reconciles for the wedding, at which point Sophie realizes she doesn't want to get married, but instead decides to travel the world with Sky. In their place, Sam proposes to Donna and they get married. At the wedding, Harry comes out as gay and says he's fallen for a local, and at the reception, Rosie and Bill get together. All of these events are, of course, interspersed with ABBA songs, and the film closes with the cast performing Waterloo. Something I find really interesting about Mamma Mia is how it became a blockbuster, despite being the exact opposite of the typical blockbuster. I'm going to look at the cinematic and cultural context of the film because I think it really emphasizes how unique its success was. Mamma Mia was a high-budget endeavor with a star-studded cast and elaborate spectacles. It was an enormous success at the box office, grossing $611 million against a $50 million budget, positioning it as the 5th highest grossing film of that year. For context, the highest grossing films of 2008 were The Dark Knight, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Kung Fu Panda, and Hancock. If you look at this top 4, you'll notice that all of the films were written and directed by men and have male protagonists. With the exception of Kung Fu Panda, they're all action films with a distinct masculine iconography. The superhero, the adventurer, the anti-hero. And this trend continues not only with the other highest grossing films of that year, but the highest grossing films of every year. And these high-budget, highly successful films are known as blockbusters. Simply put, a blockbuster is basically any film that's really popular and extremely commercially successful. Think Jaws, Jurassic Park, Joker, any Marvel film that's come out in the past 15 years. Blockbusters follow a relatively straightforward formula. They revolve around heroes fighting bad guys in dark cities, heroes fighting bad guys in space, heroes fighting bad guys in the future, heroes fighting bad guys in the past, heroes, you get the point. Something that becomes clear when you look at all of these films is the emphasis that's put on men and masculinity. And despite the dominance of women in early blockbusters like The Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind, blockbusters have seemed to evolve to really foreground a masculine style and substance, which makes sense considering the majority of them are written by, directed by, and starring men. The blockbuster truly rose to prominence in the 1970s, and Jaws is often touted as the quintessential blockbuster. By the time Jaws came out in 1975, the blockbuster strategy was in full force, but the need for it went back a couple decades. By the end of the 1950s, most American families had television sets in their homes, and the cinema audiences were declining. It's estimated that between 1948 and 1968, cinemas had lost around 3/4 of their audiences. The blockbuster strategy was employed to entice people to leave their homes and go to the cinema, and blockbusters, with all their special effects and grand spectacles, were framed as something that you had to see on the big screen. And with malls popping up all across America at this time, there were more and more screens to watch them on. Like the 1950s, with the advent of streaming services and piracy, people aren't going to the cinemas as much anymore. So there really needs to be a big event like a midnight showing of the new Spider-Man to draw audiences out to the cinema. We see now that many blockbusters are either part of a franchise like Harry Potter, James Bond, or the Avengers, or else they're part of a big brand like Marvel, Disney, or Pixar. In this sea of blockbusters, it's rare to find films that are made by, targeted towards, or even about women. Sure, we have our rom-coms and our musicals, but often these films don't attain the level of commercial success to render them a blockbuster. In the past few years, there have been more feminine, female-led, or female-made blockbusters like Wonder Woman, Ocean's 8, and Star Wars: The Force Awakens, but often these films are part of an existing franchise or a remake of an existing blockbuster with an all-female cast. In this video, I'm going to use the term female blockbuster to refer to blockbusters that are written by women, directed by women, and or have a largely female cast. A lot of the modern female blockbusters that we see fit into the masculine-coded action genre with similar spectacles that we'd see in other sci-fi or superhero films, for example. It's rare for these kinds of female blockbusters to stand on their own, and often, even if a film has an all-female cast, it's often written or directed by men.
I do want to say that I think it's fantastic that we are seeing more diversity and more women in front of and behind the camera. And I don't think that by adhering to the traditional blockbuster formula that any of these films are bad or that you shouldn't enjoy them. I'm pointing this out because I think there's an over-reliance on this type of formula by Hollywood or the film industry, and it seems like they're still hesitant to make female blockbusters that aren't remakes or franchises. And just because I say that the typical action film blockbuster formula is masculine, that doesn't mean that there's no room for women or the feminine. It's just a generalization.
Various female directors have spoken up against the bias against them when it comes to directing blockbusters and their perceived inability to helm big budget projects. Catherine Hardwicke, who directed the first Twilight film, said, "Why do you think they hired a female director? If they thought it was going to be a big blockbuster, they wouldn't have ever even hired me, because no woman had ever been hired to do something in the blockbuster category." There's an assumption that women are uncomfortable with big budget spectacles and are better suited to low-key intimate dramas or romances. The exception in the 2000s was Catherine Bigelow. Female blockbusters may be uncommon now, but in 2008 it was even rarer. But there were some films that broke the mold of the masculine-coded blockbuster, and one of those films was Mamma Mia. 2008 saw a surprising uptake in the amount and success of female blockbusters. Prior to this, there weren't many non-action, more feminine blockbusters, with the exception being Titanic. Oh, sorry, wrong clip. Titanic didn't follow the flashy, explosive blockbuster formula, and many people, including the director James Cameron, predicted that it would be a flop. But it was just the opposite, and to this day, it remains one of the highest grossing films of all time. Titanic's combination of melodrama, romance, and spectacle appealed to audiences regardless of gender and showed the earning potential for more feminine blockbusters. It's important to note, though, that Titanic's disaster elements and spectacles do adhere to some stereotypical blockbusters. Nevertheless, the 90s and 2000s were awash in chick flicks. Bridget Jones's Diary, Miss Congeniality, Legally Blonde, Made in Manhattan, and though all were successful at the box office, they didn't quite reach blockbuster status. This changed with The Devil Wears Prada, which earned $326 million and can be considered a blockbuster. It was originally slated to be released in February of 2006, which is the typical time for chick flicks to be released with Valentine's Day. However, it was pushed to the summer and positioned as an alternative viewing to Superman Returns. And this summer release was instrumental in its blockbuster success. The president of Fox 2000, Elizabeth Gabler, said of this change, quote, "We didn't want it to just seem like a chick flick was coming out." They applied the blockbuster strategy to what would normally be considered a chick flick, and it attained blockbuster success. Later films built upon the success of The Devil Wears Prada. Mamma Mia and Sex and the City, the movie, both came out in 2008 and earned hundreds of millions at the box office. Twilight's release at the end of 2008 really cemented the profitability of women-led and targeted blockbusters. All these films revolve around female characters and were targeted towards female audiences instead of the typical 18 to 34-year-old male blockbuster demographic. They introduced a new kind of spectacle. Instead of guns and explosions, we saw lush costumes, exotic locations, or elaborate musical performances. There were no supervillains plotting to destroy the world or car chases around a city. These films succeeded because they spoke to their audiences about workplace woes and female friendships. They also represented and acknowledged the female audiences whose desire for spectacle had so long been overlooked. And no film exemplifies this more than Mamma Mia. Louise Fitzgerald and Melanie Williams write, Mamma Mia departs significantly from the usual template in recent years for blockbuster success, particularly the appeal to a young male consumer. Like Sex and the City, the movie, Mamma Mia ignored the usual demographic to whom major films are encouraged to address themselves and pitched itself instead at the perpetually overlooked female audience, converting the niche appeal of the chick flick into a new mode of female-centered blockbuster. Mamma Mia was released the same week as The Dark Knight, and these two blockbusters really embody the masculine-feminine divide. The Dark Knight is a dark, gritty, film noir-esque superhero thriller that met critical acclaim for its style and exploration of the anti-hero's moral complexity. Mamma Mia is none of those things. It is a sentimental, hyper-saturated musical where people burst into pop songs every 3 minutes. You can imagine it didn't quite get the same amount of critical approval. I'll give you a little taster of the vitriol that this film was met with. The Guardian's Peter Bradshaw wrote a review entitled Super Pooper and said,
"How on earth could it not be shit?"
Anthony Lane of The New Yorker wrote,
"The legal definition of torture has been much aired in recent years, and I take Mamma Mia to be a useful contribution to that debate."
James Christopher, writing for The Times, said about Dancing Queen,
"The sight of these women vamping to Dancing Queen on a wobbly wooden pier is a truly terrifying spectacle."
For the same paper, a few days later, Melanie Reed released an article in which she thought about Dancing Queen, "What fun it would be if I was a part of it." In Reed's piece, entitled These Dancing Queens Can Be High Art Too, she argues that snobbery and misogyny prevented many reviewers, especially male reviewers, from seeing Mamma Mia for what it's worth. Never have the posh male critics been marooned higher or drier. They've missed the joke, you see. Almost everyone else in the world, it seems, especially women, got it. People love this movie despite its flaws. They love that it celebrates middle-aged women, that it laughs at itself continuously, that it is shamelessly silly and heartwarming. Couldn't agree more, Melanie. Couldn't agree more. Few critics that gave it negative reviews took a step back to acknowledge that maybe this film wasn't made for them. Roger Ebert gave the film 2 stars out of 4, but said, "This movie wasn't made for me," instead of outright trashing the film, which I really respect. A lot more critics, especially male critics, could have simply acknowledged that this film wasn't targeted towards them, it wasn't made for them, but instead of that, they just completely tore it to shreds and wrote some really mean reviews, especially about the cast. And not only was there hatred from critics, and this is hilarious, but there was apparently a short-lived Facebook group called Men United Against Mamma Mia. The group declared,
"This group of men cringes at the very thought of being subjected to a film that stands against all things manly."
First of all, how do you think we feel when Fast and the Furious 9 comes out? Also, could you imagine being so insecure? Because I can't. Anytime someone makes a group of men revolt, you know they're probably doing something right. The critical reception stood in stark opposition to the commercial success. When the Mamma Mia DVD was released, it became the fastest selling DVD of all time, and it was estimated that 1 in 4 households in the UK had a Mamma Mia DVD. And look, I'll say this and I'll say no more. That's a lie. I know that in my house, that was in Ireland, which is not the UK, PSA, we had a Mamma Mia DVD. The most important thing you need to comment on this video is whether or not you or your household owns/has owned a Mamma Mia DVD. That's all I want to know. Now, this is all not to say that the stereotypical masculine action blockbuster does not meet its fair share of criticism. For every Marvel fan that goes to a midnight showing of the new Doctor Strange, there's a film bro in his parents' basement watching Godard and lamenting the death of cinema. It's simply yin and yang. But hopefully from the examples I've quoted, you can see how disproportionate the hatred, the mockery, and the criticism of Mamma Mia was to its quality. I think when an equally bad action film comes out, it's not met with the same amount of bashing or unjust criticism as a film like Mamma Mia. It seems to me like people were so strong in their rejection of the film because it was made by women and for women. Women's tastes as a whole are viewed lower than men's. Women opt for light fluff and men go for dark, gritty dramas. Chick flicks or feminine films are often framed as guilty pleasures, dismissing them of all their value and subjecting them to undeserved hatred. I don't think there'd ever be a Facebook group made by women called Women United Against Mission Impossible. Probably because we've better things to do with our time. I think lately Mamma Mia has undergone a bit of a cultural reevaluation, not quite to the same extent as Jennifer's Body or Twilight, but I think we are slowly unraveling our internalized misogyny. So now that we've looked at the cultural impact of Mamma Mia, it's time to do what I was put on this earth to do. An in-depth analysis of the style and themes of Mamma Mia. Mamma Mia is truly immersed in the divine feminine, and you can't talk about Mamma Mia without talking about the queen herself, Meryl Streep. The casting of Meryl Streep came as a surprise to many. Streep was known for serious historical dramas and playing real-life figures. Her serious attitude towards acting and her intensely private personal life drew criticism. Criticism, Might I add that male actors who do the exact same, like Robert De Niro and Daniel Day-Lewis, are not subject to. The release of The Devil Wears Prada, where Streep played the cool, cruel Miranda Priestley, broke down her image as an ice queen and seemed to poke fun at her star persona. Andrew Anthony wrote for The Guardian, "The notion that there was warmth and a beating heart under the porcelain exterior extended beyond the character to the intensely private Streep." Something about that phrasing just really rubs me the wrong way. Like, if you met Daniel Day-Lewis and he smiled at you, would you be like, "It's crazy that there's emotions underneath that cool steel exterior with all its cogs and gears"? I don't think so. Nevertheless, people didn't expect multi-Academy Award winner Meryl Streep to debase herself by starring in a musical. But Streep saw the stage musical of Mamma Mia on Broadway shortly after 9/11 and wrote a letter to the cast thanking them for the joy that they brought to the city. Not to be mean, but like, would John Wick bring that same amount of joy? Meryl Streep wasn't the only star power they cashed in on. Pierce Brosnan, or as my dad called him when I was talking to him about Mamma Mia, "Your man from Navan, that Bond fella," was of course most widely known for playing James Bond between 1995 and 2002. So his casting as Sam Carmichael in Mamma Mia brings with it a sense of hypermasculinity. Critics were not kind to Mr. Brosnan. They tore his singing skills apart, saying that it was a crime against popular music and that his stab at SOS is the sound of a man gargling TCP. Though his singing skills aren't the best.
Whatever happened to our love?
Or, good, I think it really adds to the characterization of Sam. We expect this suave ladies' man, but when he's trying to reconcile with Donna by singing to her, he's really exposing and embarrassing himself in a way. If his voice came out sounding like Frank Sinatra, I don't think he'd be as likable. He humbles himself by singing and emphasizes his desire and vulnerability. As a whole, I think this film really breaks down toxic and hypermasculinity. Though there are 3 candidates for Sophie's father and we never find out who it is, they agree to co-parent and there's no competition between them at any point.
No, I just want to say it's great to have even have a third of Sophie. I never thought I'd get even that much of a child.
As well as that, Sky doesn't treat Sophie like the old ball and chain stereotype.
It's my stag do. My last night of freedom. Which is how some people might see it. But for me, the last night before the greatest adventure of my life.
He truly loves and respects Sophie. This film just really feels like, as a whole, it respects women. And that's probably why it felt so new and refreshing in 2008. Despite the search for a father driving the plot, the narrative is very much wrapped up in female friendship and solidarity. The film puts female friendship at the forefront with the trios of Donna and the Dynamos and Sophie and her friends, but the older trio of women get far more screen time. They have this energy and exuberance that you don't often see in older female characters. Imelda Wheelahan argues that older women have been positioned in the cinematic margins as mother, grandmother, domestic servant, spinster, or infirm person once they reach a certain age. But that's not true of Mamma Mia, which was and still is quite unique in its portrayal of middle-aged women. It's rare that we see older women like this on screen. More recently, Grace and Frankie has been heralded for its portrayal of older women who aren't sad and sexless. But that's one of only a few examples. Tanya, Donna, and Rosie are all desiring women who also spark desire in others. Donna is at no point shamed for having sex with 3 guys in a short amount of time. Sophie even says to her,
I don't care if you slept with hundreds of men.
And her friends even chastise her for not prioritizing sex and her desire. Donna's costuming highlights her energy and her youthfulness. Her overalls at the start of the film, as well as her behavior, like running to see her friends, hiding under the covers, all positions her as childlike. Tanya is portrayed as quite promiscuous, with 3 marriages and some wild times behind her.
What do you suggest we do with 3 men? Oh.
Well, then now that takes me back.
But Tanya, despite being a 3-time divorcee and a rich woman who dabbles in plastic surgery, is not villainized because of her vanity. And it doesn't inhibit her empathy or her compassion. Her friends poke fun at her, as friends do, but she's never framed as narcissistic or self-absorbed. She catches the attention of the bartender Pepper and sings "Does Your Mother Know" to him, patronizing him. And where else have we seen older women be desired by young men and turn them down? All the cast members, regardless of their age, bring the same amount of energy to the film, and the weariness or fatigue that we might normally associate with middle-aged characters are cast off by energetic and upbeat numbers. Everybody in this film feels free and moves with such liberation. Meryl Streep doing the splits midair is one of the most iconic and recognizable film stills. Considering Mamma Mia means my mother in Italian, it's no surprise that the film revolves so heavily around motherhood. The classic mother-daughter relationship on film isn't usually positive. It depicts a mother who has to sacrifice her happiness for her daughter, or a mother who's overbearing and stifles her daughter. The mother may have committed some social or moral error, like getting pregnant out of wedlock or wanting to work as well or instead of raising children. And these actions typically negatively affect the daughter. A lot of the time, there's tension and unhappiness built into this maternal dynamic. But in Mamma Mia, though Sophie is angry at her mom for keeping her fathers from her, they both love each other, and Donna is framed as having successfully raised her daughter even though she was on her own and struggled with money. There's no lack between them, and it's really refreshing to see a mother-daughter dynamic portrayed so positively. In the making of documentary, Colin Firth says,
"This is probably the most thoroughly brought to you by women, package that I've ever been involved with."
The trio of women on screen is also present off screen, with the producer, writer, and director mirroring Donna and the Dynamos. Phillida Lloyd directs this film with a distinctly feminine touch. One of the most significant moments for me is seeing Sophie wearing a one-piece bathing suit. I can't think of many modern films that dress women in one-pieces, and though I may be wrong, I feel like had a male director done this, I think she would have been in a bikini, and there may have been some lingering or objectifying shots of Amanda Seyfried's body, but none of that is present here. And instead of objectifying Sophie, Phillida Lloyd playfully objectifies the Speedo-wearing, dancing snorkelers. But there's even a camp element to this as they hit bodybuilding poses in their choreography, and they're also prancing around in flippers. There's no lingering on their glistening abs or bulging biceps, and it's more humorous than tantalizing.
In the behind-the-scenes documentary, the men talk about how Mamma Mia reverses the typical dynamic of women being objectified for men's pleasure. Here, it is the men who are the eye candy.
This film is written, produced, and directed and designed by women, which means that we 3 men, we are the bimbos in the film. Being a man on this production makes you understand how women usually feel.
Get your
totally
chin up.
Objectified
It could seem like a chick flick, except I can assure you that the guys on this movie say this is the most fun they've ever had.
There's also other small touches that suggest the presence of a female director, like Sophie cutting her legs shaving when she's getting ready for her wedding. And it's something small, but anybody who shaves their legs would recognize the stress of that happening on their wedding day. And it leads to a really tender moment between the mother and daughter as Donna bandages her leg. And even small jokes are immersed in the feminine as Tanya pretends to smoke a joint using a tampon.
The cast have nothing but compliments for their director, despite the perception that women are more emotional and less capable of directing big budget projects. Meryl Streep says,
"And I've seen many, many men brought to their knees by things that she just says, well, that's not a problem. She just goes right straight through it."
All the cast emphasize how cool and methodical Lloyd is in getting exactly what she wants, and this is further proof to misogynistic naysayers that female directors are as competent and talented as male ones.
Though this isn't a scholarly or intelligent take, with all the subversions and revolutions this film takes part in, I think a huge part of the success of Mamma Mia is that it's just fun. Everything in Mamma Mia is turned up to 11. The colors, the energy, the glitter. There's some inconsistencies with the shots. Some have this dreamy, hazy filter that's inexplicably disappeared the next shot, but I don't really take issue with those inconsistencies. I feel like with this film, you just gotta let it ebb and flow. You just gotta let the vibes wash over you. There are so many fun and campy moments in this film. Like when Donna has flashbacks to spending time with the men 20 years ago, instead of putting in younger actors, they just have some fun hair and costumes. There's also playful nods to the actors' other roles, like Colin Firth playing the Fountain is a nod to his role as Mr. Darcy in Pride and Prejudice, and he also introduces himself as
I'm Bright, Harry Bright,
when he's standing next to a former Bond. You can tell everyone just had the time of their life filming this, and in behind-the-scenes footage, you can spot the actors sipping on champagne between takes. The joy and energy of this film just bleeds through the screen. The colors, the music, the beautiful setting, the acting, they all work together to just wipe your brain clean of any thoughts for an hour and 48 minutes and just let you sit back and feel joy. I hate to say it, but I do have one critique of this film. I'm so sorry. It's more of a question. Where are the Greek people? This film takes place in Greece, and it borrows so much from Greek mythology and Greek culture, like the Fates and Aphrodite. But I don't think there's more than 2 words of Greek spoken in this film, and they're spoken by Pierce Brosnan.
Kathira.
What?
Monday.
The Greek people in this film are just kind of props in the background that occasionally harmonize with or react to the main characters. I also saw this Refinery 29 article that pointed out that all the locals wear antiquated clothing. Elena Nicolaou writes, Mamma Mia hilariously clothes them in a kind of friendly villager garb, as if the wardrobe of the Greek population hasn't progressed since the 60s. I'm pretty sure you can get H&M clothes shipped to Greece. The locals seem to embody what people imagine Greek people look like instead of what they actually look like. I love so many aspects of this film, but I would have loved to have seen more of Greece or just more Greek people, considering that the film borrows so heavily from Greece and Greek culture. But that's the end of my Debbie Downer Mamma Mia negativity. Mamma Mia is nothing without the music. As Roger Ebert put it in his review, the plot is a clothesline on which to hang the songs. Kind of a roast, but true. The film barely goes 3 minutes without somebody bursting into song. I read an excellent article in my Mamma Mia book by Malcolm Womack called Everyone Listens When I Start to Sing, Gender and Ventriloquism in the Songs of Mamma Mia on Stage and Screen. His ideas really form the basis for this section. He examines how the playwright and screenwriter Katherine Johnson altered the lyrics and meanings of the original songs to change their gender dynamics. He writes, they have fundamentally reimagined the lyrical content of the ABBA songbook, reconstructing some questionable songs and subverting ABBA's idea of gender in order to create a surprisingly feminist piece of theatre. Just to let you know, I should have Googled the pronunciation of these names and I didn't, so I'm sorry. But the group ABBA is made up of two men, Benny Andersson and Björn Ulvaeus, and two women, Agnetha Faltskog and Anna Frid Lyngstad, aka Frida. Benny and Björn were songwriters and viewed as the creative geniuses behind ABBA, while Agnetha and Frida were the singers. Womack argues that through this dynamic, the women act as mouthpieces or ventriloquists for the men. And once you look at the lyrics the women sang, you can see how some gendered or sexist opinions arise. Womack writes, the female singer is frequently positioned as unexceptional at best and pathetic at worst, incapable of action or self-improvement, and only given purpose by the intervention of a benevolent man. I won't go through every Mamma Mia song, but pick out a couple that I think changed the original meaning in an interesting way. Some songs are changed just by the character that sings them. Like I Have a Dream opens the film with Sophie rowing a boat to mail the invitations to her fathers, and instead of infantilizing the original singer, the song conveys the youth and naivete of the 20-year-old Sophie. SOS was originally sung by Agnetha, and the chorus is, when you're gone, how can I even try to go on? Framing the woman as an obsessed, clingy partner. The film restages it as a duet between Sam and Donna, changing the panicked desperation from being the woman's burden and hysteria to a gender-neutral experience that's shared between the two exes. Lay All Your Love on Me similarly positions the female singer as a jealous and obsessive lover who wants all the attention of her partner, but again, restaging it as a duet flattens this gender dynamic and makes it more fun and sexy. Sorry, that's my professional opinion. Does Your Mother Know is probably the biggest change. When you see a 34-year-old Bjorn singing to a teenage girl, you're so hot teasing me, but girl, you're only a child. I can chat with you, baby, flirt a little maybe. Does your mother know that you're out? It's a little weird. Dare I say creepy. When Tanya sings Does Your Mother Know, it becomes emasculating. And that's not to say it's malicious or demeaning. It's quite playful, but it puts the woman in the position of power rather than patronizing a little girl. Also, seeing Christine Baranski, who was 55 at the time, dance with such agility, energy, and grace is truly amazing to watch. Here and throughout the film, the choreography manages to feel spontaneous, which I think is a really hard thing to achieve. But whether it's Voulez-Vous or Dancing Queen, the characters seem to be making up the moves on the spot, and like I said earlier, they all move with such freedom and uninhibitedness that it's such a joy to watch. Now that I've looked at the songs, the style, and the themes of the film, I think I've pretty much said everything I possibly can about Mamma Mia. Or have I? I'm just kidding. I'm done. I don't know how you all are doing, but I feel like my brain has emptied of all thoughts now that I've spoken for an hour and a half about Mamma Mia, and I'm also a little bit tipsy. But I had the time of my life researching and writing this film. Despite all my analysis and background for this film, at the end of the day, Mamma Mia is meant to be a fun film to sing along to and maybe try your hand at doing the splits midair during Dancing Queen. Please be advised to do this move under the advice and guidance of your doctor. Film Fatales is not liable for any injuries, maiming, or death that may occur upon trying to do this move. It may not be summer for much longer if you're living in the Northern Hemisphere, but at least we can be comforted by the fact that we know we'll always have Mamma Mia to make us feel like we're dancing on a Greek island. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I'm gonna go polish off this little glass of vino, and I'll see you in my next video.